get a more professional, polished, production-ready application. So that's what we want to do this week, and we're going to have to modify all three of those sets of files, models, views, and controllers, in order to give us better functionality, better user interface, a better user experience. So that's what we're going to focus on this week. Next week's class is super important because we're going to look at how do we use the .NET tools for providing authentication and authorization, right? How do we secure parts of the application? How do we grant access? How do we set up rules and permissions? So I've got my store from last week. I'll just launch it without debugging to start IIS Express. So last week we connected our application to our database, and then we used the Entity Framework Wizard to generate our models and our database connection. And then we used the scaffolding again to generate a categories controller with a set of views, which was pretty simple. I had a quick look at a bunch of assignments already. I haven't marked them yet, but it seemed like for the most part, people in the root class found it fairly easy to create a controller and views, right? Just a few clicks in Visual Studio, really, to set this up. So it gave us a list where we can then add, edit, and delete. And we very briefly looked at, we made a couple of changes to this page last week. So our categories index that got scaffolded, the title here, we changed it. The page title said index, and it said index up here, which is not very descriptive. So we changed those titles to say categories, and we removed the details link. We also added a couple of bootstrap classes here to give us some alternating background. We want to do some more customization here. Then we also need to deal with, say, this. Okay, well, in this case, that's good. Our validation's already here. But there'll be some other things we want to do. Okay, we're going to want to add some products. Right now, our product list, right? We just kind of have an empty list. So we're going to want to rescaffold a product. We're going to want to scaffold a product controller that has all the methods for adding, editing, and deleting a set of views. Then we can start adding products to the database and linking those to categories. Then when we go and look at a category, we automatically want to see all the products inside that category show up. Another thing we're going to add with our products is we're going to add the ability to upload a photo to that product. So we're going to look at how do we process and save a file through this. Okay, so we're going to try and get all of this stuff up and running today. Let's do something simple first. Let's add a new category. So far we've got books, watches, and mobile phones. Let's add one more category. What's something else we might want to sell in the everything store besides books, watches, and phones? Sorry? We're going to sell vehicles? All right. Okay. Now, notice the order of the data on our page. How is our data ordered here? So it goes books, then watches, then mobile phones. I added vehicles, it shows up at the bottom. Yeah, so we can pretty much assume, and if I roll over, right, we see edit 1 down in the status bar. Obviously, books was category 1, ID 2, ID 3, ID, in this case, 5, because I had created and then deleted a category. So we've skipped over 4. This probably isn't the best way to present this list. So what would make more sense in terms of displaying categories? How should they be displayed rather than being displayed by ID? Probably alphabetically makes sense. So for this, I want to modify the method in the controller. When we write our query, we also want to add a sorting feature to sort those alphabetically. So if we go to our categories controller, we scaffolded this last week. I'll just close everything up with this. So which method do we want to modify? Which method is being called on this view? Right. So here's our list of methods. We can easily navigate around, right? We're interested in the index method. That's basically the home page for this section of the site. So we didn't write this code. Visual Studio scaffolded it for us. So right now that just uses our database connection class we created last week. Then it uses the categories data set. So by default, that's going to order the records by primary key. So before we convert this to a list, we can simply add in an order by function here. So this syntax, you may have used it before in your C# course, you may not have. This syntax is called Linq, L-I-N-Q, which is a language independent network query, meaning we can use this query syntax regardless of what the data source is. It could be a text file, it could be JSON data, it could be XML, or it could be a database. So we're writing commands that are similar to SQL, but it's not actually SQL. So we have this order by. So not only are we going to query the categories and render them as a list, but we also want to do some sorting. So I'm just going to create a variable here called C and use a lambda expression or a fat arrow expression. Have you guys seen these before or used these in any of your other courses? Okay. Anybody explain what a fat arrow expression or a lambda expression is in simple terms? Well, in this case, the object that we're going to get is categories, right? We're going to get a list of categories here in our query. And then we want to perform an operation on this object. So I can just create an in-memory parameter. I can call it whatever I want, but I'm going to call it C because it's a reference to this object we're getting. So when I define it this way, notice if I hit dot, it now references the categories object that we're querying. So we're getting categories and then we're doing something else as a result. We could do this in a separate line of code, but it's much more efficient to do this all at once. So first get it and then reference the object we got. So what do we want to order by? Category ID, right? We want to order by name. So this is the sort of shorthand equivalent of writing an SQL query that contains an order by categories.name clause at the end of it. So we have order by. We also have, if we wanted to, for example, we have order by descending. We have order by and then by. So if we want to order first by one column and then by another. So we'll look at some of the different options we have here. So the C just refers to that object. But it's like a shorthand, so our code is really efficient. Right? Rather than getting the categories first and then doing a separate operation to sort them, we can do it in a single line of code using this lambda expression. So now if we compile, we've made no changes to the view, we've just changed the data that's being passed to the view. We're getting the same list, but we're getting it in a different order now. So if we go back and click our categories link again now, books should be first and watches should be last. Right, so my list should be books, mobile phones, vehicles, watches when it's finished loading. Well, it's super slow. It was last week too. I'm not sure. I think I'm connected to my Azure database right now. I'm not connected locally. I'll just go and check my web.config file. There. Okay, so now we get it sorted by ID 1, 3, 5, 6. So watch is down at the bottom. So doing sorting is really easy. We can just use order by or order by descending, and our data is automatically going to get displayed in that order instead. Again, this is something we're not doing in the view. We're doing it in the controller in the logic layer when we query the data. Simpler than trying to manipulate it once it's been passed to the view. Okay, let's do one other thing with this. Let's also make it, we've got an HTML table here, and normal user behavior when we present a grid of data is typically something like this. Here's a table of data, an HTML table in rows and columns. What will happen if I click here? Notice it shows me it's a link. I can click it, I get the little hand. What do you expect to happen? Right. I can resort. What if I click it again now? Okay. So typical behavior users will often expect to be able to do when they're looking at a grid of data. Click on any column heading and the data will sort in one direction. Click it again, it will sort in the opposite direction. So we want to enable this on our list of categories. Not so critical here because we're really only showing one value, but later when we add our list of products or we have multiple fields like product name, price, it's helpful to be able to sort by any column. So there's a really simple JavaScript library we're going to use. It's in the week 5 folder. So we want to use this library and then we can add it, we can implement it on any HTML table in the site, and it will automatically add this functionality of sorting up and down. So step 1 is let's go and grab this. Actually, sorry, step 1 is let's click on this link. Let's go to the site. It's an open source library. So it will take a table like this that's just static HTML rows and columns. And when we implement it, we get this functionality instead. It's a nice generic library. We can put it in any site built on any language that includes HTML tables. So there's basically 3 steps. We're going to download the library. We're going to link to it in our page. And then we just need to add this class name to any HTML table tag that we want to enable sorting. That's it. Okay, so let's try this. So step 1, let's download the library. So I'm going to right click this link, save it. Where should I put it? Where's the expected location in my project of where client-side JavaScript files are typically go? Mo? It is inside the scripts folder. So if we open up scripts, we've already got a bunch of front-end scripts like jQuery and Bootstrap. You don't have to put it here, but this is the expected location. So I'm going to save it here. Step 2 is we want to link to the script we just downloaded. Now, they said in the instructions is put it in the head of the page. We don't want to put it in the head. Why do we typically want to put JavaScript down at the bottom of the body instead of the head? Right. If the JavaScript is slow, we don't want it to block the loading of the content of our page. We want the JavaScript to load at the end. Now, we could put it right in our categories index view, and then we could use it here. Where I would suggest this isn't the best place for us to put this link. Where might it make sense to put this link instead of putting it directly in this view? Right, Anjali, why do we want to put it in the layout file? Right, because if we put it in the layout file, that script is available on any view we put in the application, so it's scalable. If we put it here, it's available on this view, but it's not available on any others unless we add the link. We put the link in layout, it's available everywhere. So I will open up my layout file. And down here at the bottom, it's got some scripts. So I'm going to copy the URL where the script comes from into a comment. Scripts folder. Sortable.js. Two T's. It's sort table is the name of the JavaScript file. There's one little gotcha with the spelling here, which I'll explain in a minute. So we're linking to this file. So now we should be able to use this script in any view on our site where there's an HTML table. So we've done step one, we've downloaded it, we've done step two, we've included it, linked to it, and then we just add the class of sortable. Now notice this little gotcha here. The JavaScript file has two T's, but the class we're using only has one. So it's sortable with one T. So if I go to my categories index, our table tags on line 13, we've got table, table stripe, table hover. Add the sortable class and refresh, we should be able to now sort up or down. So I'll reload my view, and now I should be able to click on the name heading and sort to the table tag on categories index. By adding this class, it will use that JavaScript library. So now, if I click name, notice it gives me a little down arrow. If I click it again, it resorts, gives me the up arrow. So super easy to implement. Download it, link to it, add the class to the table. So this is not a .NET library. This is just a plain JavaScript library. It can be used in any kind of application. So we can sort up, down. All I did was add this. So I've added lines 46 and 47. So my library is working. I'm going to actually push this code up to Azure now because a number of people had issues in their assignment where they added things like JavaScript, CSS, or images and said, it works locally, but these things are not working when I publish to Azure. Why? Okay. And as you see, this works locally, but if I push this to GitHub and Azure now, this JavaScript isn't going to work. And I'll show you why, and then I'll show you how to fix it. Okay. because I know I had emails and conversations with several people in the class who had similar problems on their assignment. So I'm just going to go to my Team Explorer and I'll push sortable. I'll just let this push, give Azure a minute to load my new version. So if you had this problem in your assignment 1 and you have images or CSS that's not showing up, don't worry, you won't lose any marks for it because I didn't show you how to do this. Okay? You can fix this for assignment 2. I won't penalize you for it. It's not very intuitive how this works. Actually, I'm going to open up my Git repository as well just so we can see it. So I'll go to categories. Here's my repository, which I just updated. Excuse me. I'll maybe add a link to that sortable library here on the homepage. Again, give credit to the developer. So when I click here, notice nothing's happening, right? So I'm getting different results running locally and running on Azure. Here's why. If I go into my repository and go into scripts, you'll notice it's on GitHub, so it's here. The problem is when I go to Visual Studio, open the scripts, notice it doesn't show my sortable JS file. It's here. Right? If I go and use open in File Explorer. So sortable's here, it exists, and obviously we know it must be there because it works locally. Yet it doesn't work on the server. So the file is on GitHub, but clearly it's not on Azure. If I try and go there directly, getting 404 error. So why is this? Works locally, we know the file's here, it's on GitHub, yet it didn't get deployed to Azure. How come? You got it. This is not very intuitive, but when I save the file to scripts in Windows, Visual Studio doesn't know that file exists. So it works locally, but Visual Studio keeps track of all of the files that are part of our project. And because that file isn't showing up here, it doesn't consider it part of the project. So when Visual Studio pulls the files from GitHub, it looks at, there's a hidden place somewhere in Visual Studio that says what files are part of the project. This file's not included in Visual Studio, so it doesn't get copied to Azure. And therefore the functionality isn't there. And that might be a CSS file or an image that's not showing up or not working. So here's how we fix it. And you'll notice we know it's not part of the project because you notice when I did this, I created my script and click scripts, it showed me all of these JavaScript files, but sortable's not in the list. So it's on disk, it's in the right folder, but Visual Studio is not aware of it. So how do we fix this? I clicked on my scripts folder. Up here, there's an important button in Solution Explorer on the toolbar. There's 3 files kind of overlapping, and it says Show All Files. When I click that, it says, oh, okay, we recognize this file, but notice the icon is grayed out and dashed. It's not red like the other CSS files. So it knows the file's here, but it's not considered part of the project. So if I want to include it, I just right click it, choose include in my project. Now I get the icon. All of a sudden, Visual Studio recognizes it. So now if I go back to my Team Explorer, included sortable in the VS solution. So I'll commit and push again, and this will fix my problem. So whenever you add files, images, CSS, JavaScript, you download files to your computer to use, they're going to work locally if they're in the right place, but they won't work on Azure unless they're included in the project. You might ask, well, why did they do this? Like, why didn't they just make it so that any file in the file system's in the project? So now my JavaScript is here, and if I go back, now this is going to work. Any ideas why they did it this way? I mean, it's awkward and leads to problems, but there is actually a reason why we might want to be able to include or exclude files. Okay, that's a good, it protects from, yeah, files that shouldn't be in there. That's true. So notice now I'm on my Azure site and the sorting works, right? I didn't change any of the code. I just had to add that file to my project to fix it. Can you think of any time when you might be working on a project and we might want to temporarily exclude some files from the project? Nick? Okay, yep, that's a good example. Any other ideas of any other scenarios when we'd be working on a file and we want to temporarily exclude it? Kind of related to what Nick was talking about. Okay, let's say we have an application that's up and running. We have 5 controllers in it, okay? And we need to add new functionality. So we have to build a new controller. So this website is live. It's committed to GitHub and it's deployed to Azure and people are using it. And we need to do a lot of work on this new controller. And as we're working on it, we have bugs that we haven't fixed yet, for example. That means we can't build our solution so long as those bugs are here. So what we may want to do temporarily, while we're still working on that file, but we're not finished, we want to exclude it from the project. If we exclude it, then it doesn't get included when we do a build. All that code gets ignored. So if we're working on a file and it's incomplete, we may want to exclude it when we build so that we can push other changes to the server. So then we can go back, work on the file, and when it's done, we include it back in the project. Because we can't compile anything if one file won't compile. All our C# files have to compile, or we can't build the project at all and make updates. So sometimes when we're working on things, we will temporarily exclude the files we're working on or testing, as Nick was saying. So there is a use for this, but it's not very intuitive when we add files like images, CSS, or JavaScript, right? We have to go through this process of including them in the project or they don't get deployed to the server. Okay. So there's our categories. So what we're going to do now is we want to scaffold out a product controller in views. So this should be simple. This will just take us a minute. And then we'll change this link. Instead of going here, we'll want it to go to a new products index. And then we're going to make some customizations in the models using controllers there as well. And we'll take a break and we come back. We'll look at adding a file upload as well as being able to display related data. So if we click on a category, not only can we edit the category, but we can see any products inside the category all on one page. And Visual Studio makes this really easy. Okay. So where would we go if we want to create a category controller and set of views? Which folder would we go to create this in? Yeah, we go to controllers. So what am I going to do from here? You guys all did it in the assignment. Yep, so we're going to add. Which one of these do we want to pick? Right, MVC with views using Entity Framework. We're not going to build these views. We'll let Visual Studio do it. What model do we want? Product model. That's basically all we have to pick. It's named it, it's given it the layout file, it's already linked to the proper database context. All I had to do was pick the product model. Click add. So once this is done, we're going to need to build our solution right away, right? We've added a new controller. So this controller is not included in our DLL until we build. So here's our products controller. And notice, interestingly, on the index, there's one thing that's different, right? Because products have a parent of category, it says when you query the products, also get the category. So we can show the name of the category and it automatically will pull in that parent data. We don't have to write a join to do this. It's done for us. Because we set up, remember the script when we ran the database last week, there's a foreign key relationship. Every product has a category ID. And there's a foreign key set up between those tables. And then we get all our methods. So let's build. And to test it out, we can just go to /products. This will load our new product index. There's no data here yet. There's nothing in here, but we will add some products. So here's our new product index. Now notice this is kind of awkward. We have two headings called names, so we're going to want to fix that. We'll look at why in a minute. Then description, price, photo. Again, our view says index. We're probably going to want to change that. We also now want to change this link. So right now, the product link goes to our home controller and our product method that we created a few weeks ago. Where do we want this link to go instead? Which controller and which method should it call? Yeah, we want it to call the index method of the products controller. We want it to load this view instead. We don't really need this view anymore. We don't need this one. We want this view. So we can then go and add some products in here. So where would we go to change that link? Yeah, let's go to our layout. So on my line 27, I want my link to say products, but it's now going to call the index method products controller. The new method we just had Visual Studio create. And now if I click products, oops. we get this view instead. Okay, so we need to make a few changes here. Actually, sorry, we should probably put a couple products in the database first. It'll be a little more clear when we have a little bit of data to work with. You know what? I think I put them in my local database, and now I'm connected to Azure, because if I keep, it'll be faster for me to work in my local database, but when I push to Azure, obviously the whole thing will blow up because Azure can't talk to my local database. So I'll put some products back in here again. Okay. So if I click Create New, it builds a form. And notice the other cool thing the scaffolding does. It automatically generates a drop-down list with the parent category because we have that foreign key in the database. So this saves us a ton of work. We don't have to write a query and go and fetch that stuff and create a drop-down. It's automatic. Okay, so let's go and put, you gave me some books last week, but they're in my other database. So what books do we have? Tell me something you're reading or you read recently. Anybody? Okay. You want to say about it, Mo? Okay. Mo loves this. Okay, here, let's. Okay, price for The Alchemist? $5.99. Okay, the photo will leave empty. We're going to replace this with a file upload box later so we can actually grab a photo and upload it, save it, and our category is books. Okay. We'll also have to deal with this. This says category ID, which we may want to change, so we'll look at how we customize that. So I'll create that. Okay, now somebody's obviously using my version connected to my database, so now I have two versions of the same book, so I'm going to change one to something else. So I'll edit this, and the edit should work. Books. Okay, so now we have a couple of books. So notice we've got these two column headings here. They both say name. Why? We've got name and name. Right. So we can either change this globally, or I think in this case, we'll actually want to hard code right in the view here, because we want this to say name, and we still want this to say name. It's really just on that index view. We want this to say category and this to say product. Then we also want to add that little JavaScript so we can click on any of these headings. Now I got to add a third one. If you're using my database, don't keep adding the same products. And somebody just deleted the products, okay? Please don't delete stuff. If you want to delete stuff, please use your own database. It's going to be frustrating and a waste of time if I have to add data repeatedly, okay? So I'd suggest use your own local database. If you're going to use mine, make sure you add unique data, and please don't delete anything I add in. Okay? That's not a great use of our time. Okay, so at least we've got 3 products. So let's go into our product index. Let's change this to say products. Let's change these headings. And then we also want to change those column headings and add sorting. We might also look at formatting this as currency. So again, the scaffold gives us a good place to start, but it's not production ready, right? We can't hand this to a client and say, here you go. Here's the product page. So let's go to our product index. We'll change both the heading on the page as well as the heading at the title in the title bar to say products instead of index. So here, notice it's showing, yeah, the category name. So I'm just going to hard code these in as category and instead of having two columns that both say name at the top, the first column will say category and the second category will say, second column will say product. Right, so this will change, and these two things will change. We also want to add our alternating row colors as well as that JavaScript so we can sort by any column. We can do all of this on one line. What line number would we change to add the alternating background colors as well as the column sorting? Yeah, on line 13, we'll just add the same classes we added to the category index. We can add table striped, table hover, and then sortable with one T. Now if we refresh, we'll get alternating colors. Now we can sort by product, by category, description, or price. We might also want to take the description out of here. Descriptions may be long. If we have lengthy product descriptions, it's not going to render very nicely in a list. So I think we're going to take out this heading entirely. We'll take out this entire column, and then we'll also add some currency formatting around the price. So my description column, I'm going to get rid of that one entirely. The other thing I'm going to do, we have this empty column heading over here above our links. I'm going to put a heading in here above them. So we have this empty TH down here. I'm going to put in a heading that says actions. I'll take out my description heading in my description column. We just want category, product, price, photo, when we'll get to it. Once we can upload a photo, we can actually display a little thumbnail image of the product as well. So it's looking better. We can sort. So I also want to format this as currency. There's a couple ways we could do this. Well, question? You also have to take the description column out here, right? There was a heading in the header row, but then inside the loop, there's also the TD for description. You got to remove that. Otherwise, you have an extra column in your table body that you don't have in your header. So you want to have the same number of columns. So this will be the last thing we're going to do before we take a break. We could just format it on this view as currency. That would work. However, when I then click details, we'd have to go and format it as currency on this view as well. If we know every time we display the price, we want to format as currency, we can actually do this globally. We can set up a format on this property in the product model. And then anytime we display a price, a product price, it will automatically be a currency rather than a regular decimal number. So it's more efficient to do this in the model than doing it in the individual views. So I'm going to open up our product model. So this was auto-generated last week. And in price, I'm going to add one of these. So notice our name, it's got a couple of annotations that it's required, and it's max 255 characters. We have no rules at all around price, no annotations around price. Which one? There's a few different ways of doing this. Let's just see. I want to do it. We're going to set up a display format. So when this field is being displayed, our data, we're going to format it as a string. This is Microsoft's currency format. So the 0 represents the value we're formatting, and the C is currency. So this is actually based on the currency of the server. So if our server is in India, the currency will show in rupees. If our server is in Japan, it will show in yen. We're not hard coding it as dollars or cents. So if I build, the price on both our index and details views should be formatted with the $ now. This applies anywhere the price is displayed. We'll just check and see if it worked. I know some of you are still working on it. We'll just go back and refresh. So we should get a $ here, and we should also get the $ when we go and look at the details view. We will have a break in a minute. Right, so we get $ again. We haven't had to touch the view. When I click on details, right, so that change is global anywhere we show that value. So it wouldn't be wrong if you wanted to format it in the view directly, you can, but it's more work. And it means if we have additional views that show that product price, like when our shopping cart, we're going to have to format it on all of those. We don't want to do this. By doing it in the model, it's global. No, it's not that smart. So if this was rupees, it would be 6. Yeah, it's not that smart. It doesn't know conversion values, which are changing minute by minute anyway, right, on the global currency exchange. Notice one other interesting thing. When I click edit, notice it doesn't show up here. Right? There's a reason for this, right? We set the display format, meaning when we're showing the value, but not when we're adding or editing. And the reason we want it this way is so that users don't have to enter the $ when they're adding or editing. They can just type in the value, and they don't have to worry about giving us that format. So again, doing this in the model, it applies globally. It makes it easy for us to add formatting around things. Okay, we need to take a break. So I will push what we've done so far to GitHub. We'll come back at 12:35. And then we're going to want to start to look at the, soon we're going to need to look at the product photos. How do we include those? And then how do we pick a category and show all the products in that category? Mo, I'll be with you in a moment.